Hello everyone, this is a video that I've been wanting to make for the longest time. I am extremely excited to announce my first ever Chessable course that just was published the last week. This video will introduce the entire course. I'll talk through the process of coming up with the idea, and of course, we'll take a look at what is inside the course itself. So, what is this course? Well, it is Premature Resignations Keep on Fighting, and as the name might suggest, we're going to take a look at 150 examples where players prematurely resigned, meaning they resigned a position that they should not have resigned because objectively they were either winning or they could draw. And so this course basically is a compilation of those positions, and, there's a lot more you can read through the description. You can have a bit more information about the course itself here, but you can take a look at that on your own time if you wish. The link is in the description to see this homepage. I don't want to bore you with sort of the details of the course. I want to jump straight in and look at what the course actually contains inside of it. Okay, so the course is broadly split into the chapters that you see on the screen right now. We have an introduction where I kind of just talk about largely what I'm talking about here, what you'll see inside this course, and then we get into the actual content. So the first big chunk of the course is in this over the board games section right here. And essentially, these are 50 examples of premature resignations that happened in real games. And this is sorted by the date. And so you see, we start with very, very ancient games that had premature resignations. And as we get towards the end of this section, you have games as recent as just 4 years ago. And as you can see, we have some pretty big names that you might recognize, Anish Giri and Sam Shankland, for example. And so there's some really strong players that are that have fallen victim to premature resignations, and I showcase all of that here. Okay, so now that you see what awaits you inside the over the board games, let's take a look at some of the concrete examples that I go through. So the first one in the over the board game section that I want to show is this one right here. This was a game from 1932. If you're not familiar with how Chessable works, you're going to have this board in front of you that is interactive. You can move the pieces, and you also have some guiding text that kind of explains what you're looking for in this position. So here I wrote, as black, mate seems unstoppable. I'm noting the mate on g7. And indeed, Reuben Fine with the black pieces believed this was the case, and so he resigned. However, there is a cool idea that he missed, and it is now your turn to try to find it. So, if you were actually going through the course and you got to this position here, you would kind of consider your options and you'd hopefully find the correct approach. I'd give you a chance if you'd like to pause the video and find the correct move here. Note that there is a timer, but you can disable the timer and you can play around with the settings as you like. But generally speaking, these puzzles are largely either you see the solution or you don't, and that is part of, I think, the importance of going through these puzzles. It widens your horizon for different moves that you otherwise might not consider. So here, how would you find the solution? Well, obviously there's this mate. So one of the steps you can take is try to figure out how can we stop it. And it doesn't seem very easy or, good to stop it. You can sacrifice your queen, but okay, that doesn't achieve anything. But then maybe you'll stumble across this idea of going rook e5, and you are intercepting the mate. Now, what's the idea? They can just take it, but now you've distracted the queen from f2, and therefore allow this perpetual. So I comment a little bit more after every puzzle. I comment more about kind of the context and some of the other lines that maybe you would consider, and just generally a bit more text to give you a better grasp of this position, and so you can have more takeaways that you can then apply into your own games. But this is a typical position and puzzle that you'll see in this book. You'll have sort of a very difficult task ahead of you. It seems impossible to stop a mate, for example, and then you have to think very creatively, and hopefully you'll find the puzzle. Let's look at a couple more. So here, the task is a bit different, right? There isn't really a mate necessarily that you're very directly defending from, but still there's some tricky things, right? Because, okay, the queen is under attack, there's some tension here, and if you move the queen somewhere random, then there will in fact be a mate with queen f1, and this is what I sort of write here as well, right? Black just played queen a6, either forcing the queen trade, but again, if you take the queen, then the endgame does not look very inspiring. You're just down the exchange and black will capitalize. But if you move the queen somewhere random, like I mentioned, there is mate on the f1 square. So what's the solution? Again, an impossible seeming puzzle, but this is where you have to think very creatively. And wow, this one's one of my favorite ones. The move is g4. Okay, what does this do? It's check, obviously, but now you take the pawn with the knight, which seems mind-blowing because you're giving up the queen on b5, but knight f6 is an incredible and very surprising mate. And again, I comment a bit more about this in evil fashion. The queen and rook are outdone by a simple knight on f6, and this is a key example of quality over quantity. So I think this is another kind of cute example that I have in the book. Okay, so this is largely speaking, and let me kind of go back to the over the board game. This is largely speaking the type of positions you'll find in this chapter, the over the board section. And so this takes us now to the next chapters, the online games. And I'll be fully honest, if I could have made the entire course just over the board games, I would have. I think there is something uniquely positive about over the board games, sort of the experience of playing a chess match in real life, and I think therefore it is a bit more special to look at those games. And if people resigned in an over the board game that presumably they paid money to go to a tournament, or they spent a bit more effort than just opening up their browser, then yeah, there is a bit more of hesitation when it comes to resigning. And so if they did resign but they could have won, clearly there's something really special and unique going on there. So over the board games are really cool. Unfortunately, there just isn't that many examples of premature resignations with over the board games. And believe me, I went as deeply as you could into the internet, into so many different resources and articles and pages to try to find a collection of over the board games, and I barely managed to get an even number of 50 before I really exhausted all of my options. And so this took me to the next part of the course, because obviously I can't just leave you with 50 problems to solve. So now I went to the online games, and here I don't want to bore you with the methodology of how I found these games, but just briefly, I did make an algorithm that went through 1 billion, sorry, not 1,000, 1 billion chess games, and that is not an overestimate, that is actually accurate. It filtered through all of those games given different criterias, and I do explain a bit more about that in the introduction here. And if you are more interested, you can always comment down below, and I'm happy to go deeply into how the algorithm functioned. But for those of you who are just here for the chess, let's get back to that. The point is, I ended up with 100 more examples, which I split into online games part 1 and part 2, and these 100 other examples I think are also very useful, very interesting, and they showcase some really cool premature resignations that you can try to analyze. Okay, so here's the first chapter of the online game section. We'll take a look at one of these. So, for example, this position right here came from one of the online games. You can see the name of the players, and again, there's some text to guide you here. The position does not look very positive for white. The queen just came to g1. It's attacking the rook. There's also some mating ideas because the king does not look very strong, sitting on f5 surrounded by an army of black pieces. And so what could you do here? I mean, how can you guard both against the various different mating operations that black can try to utilize, and also against the immediate threat of the rook? And white thought there was no way to do this, and so they resigned. But the beauty of this puzzle is revealed when you consider the incredible queen sacrifice. Queen takes f6, and then bishop takes f6. And this still does not become clear, which is why this puzzle is so incredible. It's still not obvious why this works, but the idea is essentially, with the king and the bishop, you're sort of cutting and restricting black to these two ranks here, and therefore you're just going to be able to give perpetual check again and again, and the king cannot escape. They can at some point block with the queen, but then you're happy to take the queen for the rook and convert the endgame. The point is, this is now drawable by perpetual check. In fact, if the king comes to d7, as I note here, there's even a mate, so black could even lose this. So yeah, cool position here. I think this one shows you some of the brilliance that is involved in finding these defensive patterns, this queen sacrifice on f6. We'll take a look at one more right here from the online section, where again, black position looks very miserable. right? There's this knight that is pinned. There's no way to add another defender, and it seems like black is just going to lose their knight on the next move. What could possibly save black in this position? Again, that is what you're tasked with finding. I do note here that there is a candidate master playing with white, and all of these games are of a certain level. So one of the criteria is that the players needed to be above 2200. So these are high-level players that we're looking at, and black still did not manage to find the solution. Maybe you see it. The point is to take on f3. And the idea is that while they're going to win a piece here, you're going to do so much damage with your two bishops and queen on the king side that it doesn't matter if they win a knight and even a rook after that. That completely is secondary to the mate that is just going to come onto the board. So queen g4, this is a nice mating pattern that you see here. Queen g4 forcing the move g3, and then queen h3 and mate on g2 is next. There are some other variations to look at. So h3, for example, is objectively best, followed by queen f5, and then queen to g6, and the mate will still come in the next couple of moves. Black is -6 here, so they're very good. There's also the idea of, they can just take the bishop, but I go through this one as well. Queen h3, and then there's this mating pattern that, for example, could work. Otherwise, bishop h2 is made immediately. If they play f4 here, there's some ideas of knight g4. The point is, black is winning this. There's no way for white to survive. And this basically takes us to the broad overview of the main chunk of the course. We have these over-the-board games, then we have 100 online premature resignations. You might be curious, what is this Hall of Fame examples? Well, Hall of Fame, I think, directly relates to Magnus Carlsen, so I included 10 examples of Magnus Carlsen involved in premature resignations. In 9 of those examples, Magnus Carlsen's opponent could have beaten or drawn Magnus, but they resigned. And in one of those examples, there is a case that I found that Magnus Carlsen resigned prematurely. So that's kind of a treat, if you will, after you get through the main body of the course. And that's basically it, ladies and gentlemen. It took me a long time to make this course. A couple years I spent on it, 100+ hours working. And it's been an absolute pleasure to make it. I think the concept is really interesting, and in fact, part of the reason I chose this concept is because I didn't want to do an opening course because A, that market is very saturated on Chessable, and B, I feel like it might be more worthwhile to take a course, for example, from a grandmaster or an international master that teaches some of their openings that they've used very successfully in their careers. And so I wanted to pick something that frankly, I felt that I could very comfortably create a course about, and I think this topic fits both of those criteria. It's interesting, I think it'll be useful and exciting, but also it's something that I felt I could definitely undertake this project. And I think overall the course turned out pretty good, but you can be the judge of that. So there is a link in the description if you want to check this out. As always, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee that Chessable offers, so if you buy the course, you don't like it, don't worry, I won't take offense. You can always get your money back. Additionally, I will know that there is currently a sale because it was just introduced. So over the next couple of days, around a week or so, this course will be a little bit cheaper. So if that is something that entices you, I'd urge you to check this course out as soon as possible. Again, check out the link in the description. And that about will wrap the course up. I had such a pleasure writing this course, and I hope that if you do choose to check it out, you will also have a similar pleasure consuming it. If you have any questions or comments or concerns about this course, let me know down below. I would be happy to dive a bit more deeply into the process of creating the course or any other question or comment that you may have. And aside from that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.